The Last of Us Episode 8 is a very faithful adaptation of the story that we see in the game, but I think there were maybe a couple things that didn't show up in the show that I really wanted to see. Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to be reviewing and breaking down The Last of Us Episode 8 titled When We Are in Need. This episode covers the events of David's whole storyline that is from the game in a way that is a little bit different but still stays super authentic to the story. Before we get started, I want to say thank you guys so much for 60 subscribers. We're getting closer and closer to our goal of 100 and we're hitting it way sooner than I thought we would, or getting close at least. So if you're new to the channel, please feel free to hit subscribe. It's free. And leave a like and comment down below. I love hearing what you guys have to say, and let me know what you thought about this episode. Now, as per usual, we're going to go through the whole episode, break down what happens, and then afterwards, I'm going to give my thoughts. Like many of the other episodes, this one starts off with a scene we haven't seen from the game. We actually get the perspective of David's group, and we find out that he is actually keeping women and children with his group, which isn't what happens in the game at all. He's kind of got this close-knit community of people, and they're very hungry. Now, your mind starts to wander at this point because it's not blatantly stated at this time, but we see that some people are questioning what they're eating. While with David's group, we actually get to meet James, who is played by Troy Baker, who voices Joel in The Last of Us Part 1 and Part 2 video game. It was really nice seeing him, and every single time he talked, I just heard Joel's voice. He serves as David's right hand, and he actually is in the episode a good amount. We find out that David's group is extremely low on food and they're going out to hunt. In the game, after Joel gets hurt, it kind of flashes forward a bit, so you don't really know if Joel survives. In the show, we know he lives, but I kind of was missing that tension, not knowing if Joel survived at the time. Because after Joel gets hurt in the game, you play as Ellie, and you go out hunting and you're searching for food all on your own, so you're under the assumption that Joel is actually dead. Ellie is actually hunting for food as well, and she runs into David and James in the woods. I was getting really excited at this point because there's a super cool infected moment that happens in the source material, but unfortunately, again, they cut out the infected. It did kind of put a sour taste in my mouth just a little bit because this scene is kind of pivotal towards David and Ellie's relationship. And if you haven't seen it before, David and Ellie actually are in this cabin and they hunt down a deer and they have to protect themselves from hordes and hordes of infected, and they actually don't like each other like they do in the show, but they work together in order to survive. And I get that whole part as a lot of video game elements, but I feel like it actually had some narrative purpose as well. I know they can't fit everything in the show, but that was definitely something that I missed. Ellie delivers some classic lines from the game. She's on her own and she's got to be super powerful and seem like she's a force to be reckoned with, even though she probably is a little bit scared. She hunts down this deer, but David and James actually find it before her. When they meet, David tells Ellie that she can trade the deer for something that they have with their group, and Ellie asks for medicine. Now in the game, this is when you find out that, oh my gosh, Joel is still alive, but we knew that already, so the kind of effect that it has in the show isn't as strong in my opinion. David tells James, look, go get her the medicine and we're gonna have the deer. And James is kind of confused. He's like, are you sure? What's going on here? And we don't understand really why James is questioning David wanting to give her medicine, but we will later on. Now at this point, they actually leave Ellie and, she goes on her own way and David and James go back to their camp. And this was one of my favorite parts of the episode because we get to kind of mingle with David's group. We didn't really get to do that much in the game, but we actually get to see how creepy and disturbed this guy actually is. He sort of puts himself up as a father figure, in a holy way and in sort of a group leader way. And he's kind of got this religious cult vibe to him, which is really similar of the scars in The Last of Us Part 2. I really liked this change. I thought it was nice because we got to learn our villain a little bit more. We see this little girl crying because her dad actually died a couple days ago. We end up learning that the group hasn't had any food, therefore they are actually eating him. They got the body back, sure. The little girl asked to bury him, and David's kind of like, oh, we'll wait for the summertime. Meanwhile, they're chowing down on this dude. And this was so eerie. There was not really any music. We can kind of just hear the sounds of the people munching down on the food, similar to how infected would. It was a nice parallel to see human versus human instead of human versus infected. I did like this a lot. And it was gross. It was disturbing. You see some people questioning what they're putting into their mouth, because they've heard rumors that maybe that they're eating people. But some of them don't seem to have a clue and are just eating it like normal food. And some of them may know and they're still eating it like normal food. Such a great touch, such a great addition. It was probably my favorite diversion from the source material that this episode did. Now, the group is actually mad at David because they're supposed to be going after the people that killed that little girl's dad. And we actually find out earlier in the episode when David meets Ellie for the first time that he says this line, everything happens for a reason, which is, what happens in the game. But we find out that David and James are trying to hunt down Joel and Ellie. Joel actually is the one who killed that girl's father. And of course, we get the parallels between, father and daughter and, what would you do to protect the ones you love, etc. Everyone's kind of looking for the same goals, but no one ever gets a happy ending. Nice balance between right and wrong, and I think this episode kind of leans into that a lot, especially with David and his philosophy, if you can call it that. Now, the group actually took Ellie's deer back to their camp and told their group that they were going to hunt down Joel and Ellie the next day. This is kind of plot armory. I know it happens in the game, but it's more like, Ellie gets a head start and then they chase her. They don't wait a whole day. But I get it because, they're trying to feed their people and that's what's most important to them. Again, they're trying to balance the sense of revenge versus survival. So David's group is looking through the houses and Ellie is really scared because Joel is still extremely, extremely hurt. At least for the next 5 minutes. That was probably my other biggest issue with this episode, is the fact that Joel is seemingly on his deathbed at the very beginning, and not 20 minutes later, he's completely fine. Now, I say completely fine. Sure, he's still limping around a little bit, but when David's guys come in and attack him, he takes them out with no problem. I let it slide just because the next scene that happens is a direct scene from the game, and it was super cool. It's a direct callback to a scene that we actually witnessed in the earlier episodes of the season where Joel and Ellie go to these people's houses and tell them to point on a map where to go. Joel does the same technique here, but this time he is full of rage and violence, and he wants to find Ellie. So of course he tortures the first guy, then gets rid of him, and the other guy is sitting there like, what are you doing? He told you what you wanted to know, and Joel doesn't care. He believed the guy, so he didn't even need the other one. Of course, he takes him out too. This shows you the lengths Joel is willing to go in order to protect Ellie, and this is very important. We only have one episode left, and we're going to see this play a huge role into the finale. I did really like Pedro Pascal's performance here because he got to be a little bit more angry and more brutal, not necessarily quiet and reserved like he has been for most of the series. So it was really nice seeing that other side. And of course, we're going to see that heavily next episode in the finale. Now, at this point, David's group has actually captured Ellie, and we see her locked up in this cage, which is kind of ironic if you think about it because she's technically infected. She's technically a monster, but she's immune, so she's fine. But it was nice seeing this parallel because they do this in the game as well. I'm saying parallel a lot because, this is an adaptation. This isn't something that's completely brand new. They are taking source material and adapting it for television. And 99% of the time, they have done it verbatim. And the times they've switched things up, it's been really good. Again, I just wish they, kept a couple things in, especially from this episode. Ellie and David have this nice back and forth conversation, and we find out David is kind of creepy. She wants Ellie to live in his camp and actually be a, I don't know what to call it. I don't know what to call it. Maybe a wife? I don't know. A prisoner for sure. Ellie finds out that they're eating people, and they have this really intense dialogue that I really enjoyed. There were lines that were spoken from David especially that weren't in the game that were really, really good touches and added more to the story. David tells Ellie that he's actually grateful for the cordyceps. He's grateful for the infection taking over the world, and he became faithful after that. And if you haven't figured it out already, this guy is crazy. He's eating people, he's totally abusive, and he's got plenty of screws loose. He doesn't give off the same amount of sinister vibes that he does in the game, but you can totally tell that he's still a bad dude. Ellie gives her famous lines, that are reminiscent of the game. It was really nice hearing these, and Bella Ramsey puts her spin on it. And again, her performance in this episode, top notch. She is the star of this show, hands down, and I can't wait for season 2. David and James decide they're going to chop Ellie up because she won't join the group, and of course that doesn't go well because Ellie tells David that she's infected, and actually when they were taking her out of the cage, he bit her. So David's terrified because he thinks he's infected now, but we know the truth. This was something that hit the same way for me from the game. When I saw this scene in the game, knowing something that the antagonist doesn't know, it really feels good, and it actually captured it again perfectly in the show. Ellie escapes, and we have the fated duel between David and Ellie. And David actually ends up getting the best of Ellie here. He pins her down and is about to do unspeakable things, and Ellie just lets go. Earlier on in the episode, David tells Ellie that he knows how violent she is and how intense she is. And I love how they're actually not really retconning, but, preparing us for Ellie's development later on without giving any spoilers. Ellie is a little unhinged. We've seen it multiple times throughout this season already. Every time there's a murder, every time someone gets hurt or action, Ellie gets this crazed look in her eye, this 1,000-yard stare. She becomes someone completely different. And that's one of the main reasons David wanted her to join the group. But anyway, as David is trying to abuse Ellie, she actually gets the upper hand, grabs his cleaver, and bashes him to bits. As Ellie and David say, tiny little pieces. And this was great because it was a shot-for-shot reimagining of the game. And this is very important. We see this little girl so scared and so intimidated and doing what she can to survive and all that she can to survive. The one thing I wish they had changed about this scene was having the music in the background. I was waiting for it. The music adds such an element to the game, and having that song in the game while the events take place really makes you think about it from an outside perspective. You're not in Ellie's shoes anymore. You're watching what's happening. The music just added such an element for me, and I really missed it here. After that, Ellie walks outside and Joel grabs her, and she's terrified. She thinks it's another attacker, but she realizes it's Joel, and he says the line that he always said to his daughter, "I've got you, baby girl." And of course, I teared up at this moment because of reasons, both because of Joel's history and for events that are going to take place maybe later on. And this is it. This is the moment where we realize Joel has a surrogate daughter. It felt different for sure without the music playing in the background because it kind of ties a nice little bow for the story. But again, it was great. It's so hard to just put myself in the perspective of somebody who hasn't seen the events of this story play out, because I don't think it's hindering my experience, but I'm just constantly looking out for things. But I would say this show is doing a good job, not only for people who have seen the story before or who have witnessed the things that happen, but for returning fans as well, because there's so many Easter eggs, there's so many hidden details, references, etc., and they're making changes. Look, I like this episode a lot, but, again, I said this last week, the removal of the infected, I know this story isn't about the infection. I get that, and I totally respect that. The story is great. I've said it. It would be great without it, but I'm still missing it. The stakes don't feel as high for some reason without, the appearance of infected. And we're seeing a lot more alive people than infected people. And I don't know if that's my favorite thing. I really, really want to know what you guys thought about this episode. So please leave a comment down below. I read them every single time, and I actually want to see the other viewpoints. Did you guys love this episode? Have you played the game before? And if you have, are you a fan of the changes? Reading your comments is like my favorite thing. So please leave one down below and a like on your way out. I think we've set up the finale pretty well. We've completed the Joel and Ellie arc. They're very close. Their father-daughter relationship is set in stone. And now we're going to get to a point where that is tested. No spoilers, but, Joel is going to be tested in this last episode. And I'm actually looking forward to him the most because I just want a little bit more of Joel. He's definitely a different portrayal than we have seen in the game. That's for sure. But the next episode, the finale, is the defining moment where we learn who Joel really is and what he's willing to do and what his, sort of goals are, what his motive is. So yeah, I'm super excited. I can't believe we only have one episode left. I feel like these past 8 weeks have flown by, and I heard that they're actually going to start filming season 2 this year, and that gets me so excited. Hot take, but I think Last of Us Part 2 is a little better than Part 1. I know that's controversial, but I'm not going to say anything because we're going to get to it, and of course, I'm going to talk about it. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you could hit that subscribe button, I would really, really appreciate it. Again, we just passed 60 subscribers, and I'm hoping to hit 100 soon. And with that being said, I will see you all very soon.